Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome inside the second floor of the Duncan Student Center for Shamrock Sports. Johnny Soper can't be with us this weekend. He's dancing the night away at Army Ball tonight. But I'm John Horlander. I'm happy to be with you alongside Ellen Geyer and Austin Rooney. We've got a great show for you today. We got women's basketball, men's basketball, lacrosse, men's and women's, baseball, hockey, all sorts of good stuff for you. Shamrock Sports starts right now.
Hello, I'm Father John Jenkins, President of the University of Notre Dame, and thank you for watching Shamrock Sports.
Shamrock Sports, John Horlander, Ellen Geyer, Austin Rooney. New crew with you today to talk about this past week in Fighting Irish athletics. And let's start with the men's basketball team.
Why do we have to start with that?
Because, you know, we can start small. We just got to build. We got big things to come in the show. We're going to start with the men's basketball team. It's been giving us fits all year. Yeah. And they had two real tough games this week. Let's start it off with Virginia Tech.
Yeah, Virginia Tech was a tough game. Notre Dame played really quite poorly throughout the entire contest. We're out-rebounded. The rebounding was the big difference against Virginia Tech. Out-rebounded 49-27. Big point about that game, not only were they out-rebounded, on the defensively, or Virginia Tech had as many offensive rebounds as Notre Dame had defensive rebounds, which was completely embarrassing for the Fighting Irish. On the glass, and they have bigger players. John Mooney and Juwan Durham played a large amount of minutes in that game, yet they were still out-rebounded by Kerry Blackshear and Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I think it's tough because something we've seen all season with this Irish team is they've struggled to shoot, and they've struggled down the stretch. And in that Virginia Tech game, they were outshot from the field and from behind the arc, too. They just haven't been able to get their feet under them. I think it's so hard with so many young players, which is obviously a theme we've been coming back to, but obviously not being able to get enough good points on the board against that matchup. I think they should have done better than they did, but at the end of the day, I mean, this team is what it is, and they've struggled all season, so it's no surprise.
I will say, it's not like Virginia Tech shot the basketball all that well, though. Yeah. Notre Dame was shooting from the field around 32%, under 30% from beyond the arc, and that's numbers you're not going to win with. So Notre Dame has to shoot the ball better moving forward. They have some freshmen on this roster who you'd have to think moving forward in the next season are going to be better shooters and better players.
And now before we get into too deep a dive, Johnny Soper can't be with us on set today, but he does have the highlights for us. Let's check out these highlights from Notre Dame and Virginia Tech.
Hokies and the Fighting Irish from Purcell Pavilion. Early in the game, Ahmad Hill gets some separation against TJ Gibbs, knocks down the three. Blackshear off the inbound, and he hits the three. Had 22 points in this game. Virginia Tech was up big early, 14-7. Hokies, more good ball movement. Three doesn't fall, but Nikhil Alexander Walker gets the finish. Alexander Walker, again, this time on the left side, high off the window with the left hand plus the foul. Blackshear now working in on Juwan Durham. Spins, right-handed hook, gets it plus the foul. Hokies went up big in this first half. Second half action, Prentice sub, nice feed. John Mooney takes it and rocks the rack. Nice play from Mooney, almost from half court. Irish trying to make a push in the second half. Blackshear backs in on Mooney and gets it to fall. A lot of that we saw in the game. DJ Harvey drives baseline, kicks out to TJ Gibbs, who gets it. Friendly roll plus the foul. The old-fashioned four-point play. Hill passes up the three here against Goodwin, zooms past him, and gets the emphatic slam for Virginia Tech. Irish down 8, last second push, and Virginia Tech is able to break the press, get the bucket that would seal the victory, and they pick up the win and the season sweep of the Fighting Irish at home, 67-59.
Another tough loss for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish team. They fell to 3-11 in ACC play. Virginia Tech, we knew it was going to be a tough game coming in, but that game was ugly. Notre Dame did not shoot the ball well. Deeper dive. What thoughts do you have about that loss of Virginia Tech?
I mean, to me, we just shouldn't expect anything of our men's basketball team at this point. Notre Dame came into this match. Virginia's 4th in the ACC. They're 20th overall. Notre Dame struggled against teams that are just even above 500 this season. So obviously, against a ranked team, I don't think we should have expected a big performance from them. Yes, it would have been nice to have seen them shoot a little bit better, get some better minutes from these younger guys. But I mean, I'm not surprised. It is disappointing to see them play the way that they are. Only 3 players in double figures in that game, but that outcome didn't surprise me.
Well, Virginia Tech has had some big injuries, and they haven't played all that well coming into this contest. They'd won just 3 of their previous 6 games. So I thought this was a real opportunity for Notre Dame to pick up a big win against a ranked opponent. And not only did it not happen, but this team was beaten, and they were beaten decisively. The final scoreline doesn't look so bad. They lost by less than 10 points, but they were losing the entire game and were never even within a single possession. So this was a really tough game for Notre Dame, and whenever it looked like they had a chance to get back into the game, I think DJ Harvey had a missed dunk. There were a couple of other times when Notre Dame looked like they had opportunities to get back into the game, and they just didn't do it. So,
and I think that's the narrative we've seen all year, is that every time Notre Dame has the chance to, make themselves a contender in a game, they falter down the stretch. We saw it with that Virginia game. They played lights out the entire time, and then that final possession, they got the trap in the backcourt, and it seemed like they had all the momentum going in, but they really let the game slip out of their hands. So. And
going back to the performance from Kerry Blackshear Jr., I don't think we can overemphasize just how good he was. 22 points, 14 rebounds. That's obviously exceptional, but he owned the boards, and Notre Dame really never got the rebounds they needed to get in that contest.
Yeah.
Well, I have to agree with you. I think you look at the offensive performance from Notre Dame just wasn't there. I mean, they were 24% in the first half. They shot 32% for the game, 6 of 26 from 3. Virginia Tech had 24 free throws made to Notre Dame's just 16 attempted. All in all, Virginia Tech's offense just did a much better job of executing in a way that Notre Dame's offense just wasn't capable of doing. So moving on, trying to rebound from that loss to Florida State, the Irish traveled to Tallahassee to take on the Florida State Seminoles. Johnny Soper has the highlights from Monday night's loss against Florida State.
Notre Dame and Florida State on Big Monday in Tallahassee. Terrence Mann, almost as if Jawan Durham wasn't even there, with a big flush to start the game. Tight game all the way up to the finish in this one. This at the end of the first half. Rooney hooks it in, ties it just before the break. Second half now. Kumadi off the pick and roll. All 7-4 of him for that alley-oop for the Noles. DJ Harvey moving it around the perimeter, and he finally gets it. Long 3, and the Irish led for most of this game. David Nichols now inside, pretty move, can't finish, but Devin Vassell there for cleanup duty for the Noles. Now Florida State looking for their first second half lead. Vassell, top of the key. Noles grab the lead. Ensuing possession for Notre Dame. Hub drives, misses everything, but Mooney's able to grab it and put it back up. Notre Dame ties the score again. Nichols off the inbound, off balance, but Terrence Mann comes in from the three-point line and does that. Florida State would go up by 5. Now here, Irish down 4, less than a minute to play. Mooney right down Broadway to get it within 2, but that is the closest the Irish would get. Florida State pulls away in the final 40 seconds, and they pick up the victory at home, 68-61.
Irish up 53-49 with 9 minutes left in that one, fall down the stretch and lose 68-61. That drops them to a losing record for the first time this year. They're 13-15 overall, 3-12 now in the ACC, second to last in the standings. Again, 61 points is not going to get it done on offense.
Yeah, and I think it's tough too because all year Notre Dame has had these games that they should have won and they were right there, like Georgia Tech, for example. These games that you need to win if you want to be competitive in conference, particularly. But I think games like Florida State, when you show up the way you do, it makes you wonder how you don't win against Georgia Tech. So I think if Notre Dame was able to translate their play better between different teams, I think that would be helpful. But Florida State, I thought they did a nice job. They played well. But, I mean, again, it just faltering down the stretch, not being able to shoot the ball well, all these things just add up.
And I think the big thing was the performances from the entire team. You have 3 players who had good games versus Florida State. DJ Harvey, Prentice Hub, and John Mooney. The 3 of them played really quite well. But after that, whether it was TJ Gibbs, Nate Leszewski, Dane Goodwin, you go right up and down this roster, and not a single one of them had more than 5 points. So that's going to hurt. You know, you can get good performances from 3 players, but you're going to need a little bit more than that if you're going to be able to win some games.
Yeah, and I mean, an interesting stat line from that game, DJ Harvey, Prentice Hub, and John Mooney, 3 very good players, combined for 49 points. The rest of the team combined for 12 points. And now, and that's not to say that Notre Dame is a particularly deep team. There's only 4 other players that were contributing points. But still, when 3 guys are contributing almost all of your points, it was just not a lot of reason for Florida State to defend the floor on all 5 players on the floor. I mean, it was always going to be Harvey, Hub, and Mooney, the only guys who were hitting shots all night.
And the other thing to mention is that Florida State was the exact opposite. There was not a single player with more than 13 points for Florida State, and they had 5 or 6 guys with at least 8 or 9. And they were getting contributions from all up and down the roster. The amazing player for Florida State, the one who was leading the team in rebounds, he had 12 points in 12 minutes. That would be Chris Kamaje, 7'4", 268 pounds. It's tough to play on the floor. Even if you have someone like John Mooney, who's a solid 6'10", or Jawan Durham, who's probably 7 feet, that height difference is tough down low for Notre Dame. It's not like they have Michael Ojo anymore, that 310-pound, 7'1" guy from a couple of years back, but still, Kamaje is a pretty tough guy to deal with.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, too, if you look at who Notre Dame's leading scorers were in that game with Hub, Harvey, and Mooney, Mooney has been consistent all season, but Harvey and Hub have been kind of waffling. I think Harvey's been underperforming, less consistent than we'd like him to be. So I think it was nice to see him play well against the Seminoles, but then other players like Leszewski and Gibbs didn't have as good of games as they should have.
One other thing I will say about, specifically about Prentice Hub, I feel like he's made big-time strides from where he was in January. He was shooting the 3 ball at a 20% rate back in January, and he's picked that up in a big way since then. He's also shooting the ball from the field at a much higher percentage. He had 17 points versus Florida State. So he's somebody I think has really improved recently. And then as far as DJ Harvey goes, he's averaging more than 10 points a game. But what I've seen from all season long, it's been a quiet 10-plus points per game from DJ Harvey. I'm not seeing him take over games. We're not seeing him make a huge impact. He's hitting shots, but they're not the way you think of a guy who's producing as one of your top 3 scorers.
Well, I have to agree with you. DJ Harvey is a guy who has so much talent and the ability to knock down shots. I mean, his mid-range game is probably the best on this team, if not one of the best in the ACC. But again, it's always a quiet, 8 to 10 points from DJ Harvey. He's never a guy that's going to take over a game. But as you said, guys like Prentice Hub, these freshmen are improving. And so as the season winds down, Notre Dame sits second to last in the ACC. And we'll talk in a little bit about the ACC tournament that's going to come up. But you look at next year, Notre Dame loses no one except for walk-on Liam Nelligan. All of these guys are coming back, and they're going to bring in some more freshmen. And everyone's going to come back with experience. So I think that this team has a lot of room for improvement, especially going into next year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think what Notre Dame's missing this year is the leadership element. With Rex Pfluger out, they have no leadership on the floor. John Mooney obviously leading the team in so many categories as a player, but I think that they don't have that voice to kind of rally around when they get in these close games like Florida State, like Virginia, even games like Georgia Tech. And so I think when they're missing that key element, it makes it so difficult for them to have success down the stretch, and obviously that lands them where they are.
I'm going to disagree with you here. They have Rex Pfluger. He's on the bench at all times. He's in the locker room with the team. It's not like he just sort of is not there and he's totally separate from the team. He's been with the team at every single road game. I think he is still an integral member of this team, and even if he's not there out on the court, he's on the bench with the team. He's still leading the team in that way. So I'm not quite sure that Rex Pfluger's leadership is just all of a sudden gone because he's not on the court. I think he still is there and making a pretty big impact on the team. As far as the rest of the team goes moving into next season, I think this team has a lot of potential, but the question is who improves. Do we see Prentice Hub become one of the top point guards in the ACC? If so, this is probably a team that gets a 4 or a 5 seed next year in the NCAA tournament. If not, if we see small improvements here and there, they might not make the tournament yet again next year.
And so let's now turn and look at the ACC tournament coming up. Notre Dame with just 3 games left in the regular season. Notre Dame currently sits at 14th in the ACC. And if we throw up the bracket here on the screen, we'll be able to break it down. Notre Dame currently projected to play Miami, the 11th seed, in the first round. And the path for them right now would be to play Syracuse and then Duke, and then moving on to the semifinals, whoever they would face there. What do you think about this path, Austin?
Well, let's just get crazy here, folks. Remember, let's go back 4 years, I believe it was, when Georgia somehow won the SEC, when they were under 500 overall in the regular season, way under 500 in SEC play. So let's get crazy for a second here, okay? Notre Dame's best path, I think, is actually finishing dead last in the ACC, because as of right now, a team that finishes dead last would play Boston College first, and then I believe they could play someone like a Virginia Tech or an NC State in the second round. Right now it's Louisville, but things could change. NC State currently at 8. Maybe they end up taking on NC State. Maybe they play Louisville. It's not quite clear, but the big point to make here is that should Notre Dame move on to a third round game, they would not have to face off against Duke, and we saw how that game against Duke went here at Purcell Pavilion. Instead, they'd play UNC or UVA, and that's a much more winnable game for Notre Dame. We saw Notre Dame almost knock off UNC on the road. They almost knocked off UVA on the road. I think those are games that are theoretically winnable for Notre Dame. I don't see any way the Fighting Irish beat Duke.
Ellen, what's your outlook on the ACC tournament?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Notre Dame, whatever seed they end up in. I think they're just a young team. They've underperformed all season. Yeah, they've had spots of brightness with the Florida State game and the Virginia game, but I just think ultimately they're too young, and regardless of who they play, I could see a first-round win, depending on who they get. Like you said, if they get Boston College, maybe even if they get Miami. Definitely, if they get Pitt, they should be able to win that game. But I think ultimately, second round's not really in the question for this year. But I do think a good thing to note is that next year, like you said, Horlander, with all these guys that are coming back, Notre Dame has a better shot. And especially with Bray's leadership, I think he knows what each of these guys give to the table, or bring to the table, excuse me. And his coaching style all this time has been making players the best they can be individually. So I think if he can do that for next year, they should have a better shot.
Now, moving on from a team that is near the bottom of the ACC to a team that is at the top, the women's basketball team currently sit at 4th in the country, top of the ACC at 13-2 in conference, and they had a big statement road win against the Syracuse Orange, 98-68. Caroline Pineda has all the highlights for us on Shamrock Sports.
Notre Dame women's basketball traveled to Syracuse on Monday night. Early in the first quarter, Jackie Young finds Arike Agumbawale, who knocks it down from deep. Irish lead 8-5 early. Here, Turner to Mabry on the perimeter. Mabry was 3 for 7 from 3 last night. End of the first quarter, again, Young to Agumbawale for 3. Irish start to build a lead, 24-19. Jackie Young with the steal takes it the other way and feeds Mabry down low in transition. Irish lead 36-23. End of the second quarter, Agumbawale down to Turner, and Turner lays it in. Irish lead 46-27 at the break. To the third quarter, Mabry bounce pass to Agumbawale for 2. Here's Jessica Shepard down low, goes up and draws the foul. Young dished out a team-high 12 assists, driving into traffic, but watch her crossover, spin move, and finish for 2 of her 10 points on the night. All 5 starters finish in double figures, and the Irish pull away with the win, 98-68.
Thank you, Caroline. The Notre Dame women's team still top of the ACC, 4th in the country, hopefully going for a 1 seed and a repeat of a national championship. But as they move down the stretch, another huge win over a top 25 team, Austin.
It is a big win for Notre Dame. And again, they had production from their starting 5, 90 points coming from their starting 5, 24 from Agumbawale, 22 from Shepard, 17 from Mabry. So this was a really, really good game for that starting 5 for Notre Dame. And we've seen them carry the Fighting Irish throughout the entire season. And they're so skilled. I have no question this Notre Dame team can go on a run and win the ACC tournament, go on a run and win the NCAA tournament for that matter as well. I think they're an extremely talented team. I don't think that this is going to be a particularly tough finish to the season. And, moving into the ACC tournament, I would be very, very surprised if they did not at least make it to the ACC championship game.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, that starting 5 has really been carrying this team all season. Each of them individually has more points by themselves than the rest of the 8 players combined, than the other remaining 8 players on the roster. Each of them leads the team in a different category. Ogunbowale in steals and points, Young in assists, Turner in field goal percentage, Mabry in three-point percentage, and Shepard in rebounds. So they each bring something so unique to the table, and they're so dynamic together. That's 5 first-round WNBA draft picks if Jackie Young were to choose to go to the draft. So.
Yeah, this team I think is in a very comfortable position, so I would be, again, very surprised if they didn't make a deep run through the ACC tournament and then into the NCAA tournament. I think this is a Final Four team again.
Yeah.
And I think that the big benefit that this Notre Dame team has over all of the good teams that there are in women's college basketball right now, and I think that this, I've said this last week and I'll say it again, the most competitive season of women's college basketball in recent memory. Notre Dame with 8 top 25 wins is more than any other team in the country. They are battle-tested and ready for whatever challenge is going to come their way. And they know that here soon they're going to be facing Louisville in the ACC championship game. They're going to have to go through UConn or Baylor or Oregon or maybe a combination of multiple of those teams. It's going to be a tough road down the stretch if they want to repeat, but this is the one team in college basketball that has been tested over and over again and has come through on top.
Yeah, and unlike our men's basketball team, this team just has so much experience. 4 of their 5 starters are obviously seniors. Jackie Young, even though she's not a senior, she plays like one. She's got that leadership. They have that leadership on the court that the men's basketball team doesn't. So I think, like you said, they're poised to make a deep run. They have a lot going for them.
Even though Notre Dame will not be the #1 overall seed, or almost certainly not the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament, I would say this team would still be the team that I would put my money on to win the tournament right now because of the experience, having been there, and their entire starting 5 was there last season, won it all, and has done this a number of times. So again, I'd put my money on Notre Dame going into the NCAA tournament because of their experience.
Now let's transition. It's cold enough here in South Bend. We may as well talk about the team that's going to be taking the ice tonight and tomorrow for their final regular season games. The Notre Dame hockey team currently sits at 4th in the Big Ten Conference. They're not in position to host a Big Ten tournament game just yet, but a sweep this weekend might just do it for them.
Well, I think the key thing right now for Notre Dame is where they sit in the pairwise rankings. So Notre Dame currently is 17th in the pairwise rankings. What happens in college hockey is there are 16 teams that make the NCAA tournament. Now, you may think, well, you just got to get into the top 16. Well, it's a little more complicated than that because if you win your conference championship, you also get an automatic bid. So you probably need to be top 14 to get that at-large bid. So that means Notre Dame probably has to jump 3 spots right now. That means if they can sweep versus Penn State, that would be a huge start. Not only would they get to host 1, probably 2 Big Ten championship, Big Ten tournament games, but it would also mean that Notre Dame has a very, very good shot at least getting that at-large bid.
Yeah, and I think too, like the women's basketball team, this team is poised to make a postseason run should they be able to make the cut into the NCAA tournament. They've obviously had some key injuries this year. That doesn't help. But in terms of depth, their freshmen have been showing up. Obviously, some good sophomores as well, and Hellickson obviously at the defense. So I think they can do some big things in the postseason.
Yeah, it's a team that has been there before as well. I talked about this with regards to the women's basketball team, and this case with the men's hockey team is exactly the same. This Notre Dame hockey team as a 4 seed. They were barely making the tournament back in the 2016-17 season, went all the way to the Frozen Four, and then the last season, they made it all the way to the championship game before falling to Minnesota Duluth. So this is a team that has been there and done big things in the NCAA tournament. So if they're able to get in, they're a force to reckon with.
And this matchup this weekend cannot be understated. The last 2 games of the regular season for Notre Dame at home, facing off against a Penn State team that just sits one spot behind them in the rankings. So both of these teams fighting for an NCAA tournament spot. It's going to be a hard-fought matchup. What do you guys have for these 2 matchups tonight and tomorrow at Compton Family Ice Arena?
I think Notre Dame's in a good spot in hosting. As obviously, these are such critical games. It's nice to be on home ice. Obviously, Penn State wouldn't be a long trip, but I do think that's a huge advantage for them, particularly with where they are. Final games of the regular season, final games of the Big Ten, final game at home. So I think they have a lot to play for, and I think they're capable of coming away with the sweep.
I think they're definitely capable of it. Again, it was senior night tomorrow. They're going to have a lot of pressure on the line, and they're going to be coming out for this one. It's going to be a big game, not only tonight, but also tomorrow night. It's on NBC Sports Network tonight, and then it's on the NBC Sports app tomorrow night. So these are pretty big games for Notre Dame at home. And, it couldn't be a bigger series against a good team. I think they're in a good position. They have some guys playing well right now, especially Michael Graham, the freshman, who's come up really big recently.
And so as the hockey and basketball teams end their season, the spring sports are starting up. Men's, women's lacrosse, and baseball all beginning their seasons. How have these teams started off at the beginning of the spring season?
Well, let's start with women's lacrosse. You know, this is not normally a team that gets all that much publicity, but they're off to a great start, 5-0, and the big game, or the really big game, was just last weekend against Kent State. Now, to be fair, Kent State is a new team this year. They're playing just their 4th ever, women's lacrosse game in the school's history, but it was still 27-0 and 18-0 at half, and they had a running clock going for the final 48 and a half minutes of the game. So,
which happens when you're up by 10.
That's right. When you're up by 10, they have a running clock, and the entire second half, in the last 18 and a half minutes of the first half, they were up by 10, so they had a running clock. Another note is that Kent State had 1 shot and 0 shots on net the entire game. So, they struggled to say the least.
It's absolute domination. What about the men's lacrosse team?
Men's lacrosse team currently 1-1, so sitting right at 500. They have a tough game coming into Arlotta Stadium this Sunday when number 2 Maryland is going to come to town. So I think that will be a big test. They dropped a road match to the University of Richmond last week. They made a little bit of a comeback at the end of the game, but they weren't quite able to complete it. But I think they have that capability. If the Irish are on, I think they should be able to play relatively well against the Terps this weekend.
The ACC, obviously such a good lacrosse conference. What about on the diamond? How about that Notre Dame baseball team?
Well, on the diamond, they're hopefully making some progress. It was a really tough start to the season.
That's a nice way to put it. Make some progress.
It was a really tough start to the season against Arizona State when they were outscored 46-13. Game 1 was 10-1. Game 2 was 20-7, and Game 3 was 16-5. Against an Arizona State team that was not in the top 125 last year in the RPIs. This is not a very dominant team in Arizona State. With that said, they split last weekend against Eastern Michigan and Incarnate Words. That was a step in the right direction. Tommy Sheehan's pitching quite well right now. The team is currently in South Carolina playing Charleston Southern, and they're taking on Ball State afterwards. They just took home a win against Charleston Southern a couple moments ago. The game just went final. Tommy Sheehan had 8 innings of work, just allowing 4 earned runs.
All these spring sports starting up. Lots to come on Shamrock Sports as we follow these seasons to their completion. But looking ahead at this weekend, it's a Louisville kind of weekend. My hometown. Notre Dame men's team will travel down there to take on the Cardinals in basketball. The Cardinals in women's lacrosse come up here.
That's right. ACC Network Extra tomorrow.
You're going to be on the call, aren't you, Austin?
I will be on the call.
Best of luck, Shamrock Sports.
Or
expanding its
hockey
reach
tomorrow night as well. I got double duty tomorrow.
All kinds of good stuff. Austin Rooney, one of our more talented broadcasters. And, of course, men's basketball traveling down to Louisville in desperate need of a win to increase their standings in the ACC ahead of the tournament. What do you guys have looking ahead at this matchup against the Louisville Cardinals this weekend?
I don't know. I think I mean, let's just
give it to me straight.
They're not going to get it done. They can't win down the stretch. Louisville not ranked /24th, depending on where you get your info. They've struggled against ranked teams all season. Like I said before, they've struggled against teams that are even above 500. So
they've struggled against teams that are below 500.
That's a good point. I don't think they'll get it done against Louisville. Maybe they'll be able to win against Pitt. That'd be a nice little cap to the season. But men's basketball, there's always next year.
There is. I'm not seeing it versus Louisville. I was hopeful. Go back maybe a week ago. I thought pick up some wins moving into these games. Didn't happen. ACC championship. Who knows? Win 5 games against some really good teams.
Yeah, like you said, depending on what path they go down.
I will absolutely channel my disdain for the University of Louisville and say that Notre Dame will be able to get it done purely out of hope. But no, in the women, so Notre Dame will close their season with a road trip to Louisville, the men, and then Wednesday against Clemson, it's senior night, and then they travel to Pitt to end the season. The women, just 1 game left in the regular season against Virginia. Both these teams with very different motivations as we close the season. Well, thank you for watching Shamrock Sports. For John Horlander, you've had Ellen Geyer and Austin Rooney. Be with us next week, Friday, same time, same place. Thanks for watching, everybody.
All night.